Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your weekly episode of the Gersnet Podcast, hosted by myself, Craig Gray. We are the independent Rangers podcast made for fans by fans, and all of our content is absolutely free. You can get us over at gersnet.co.uk, where you've got access to the forum and the history archive as well. Also, a great article that was released earlier today as well, so please get on it, folks. You can get us over on Twitter at Gersnet Online as well. We're live tonight, folks, on YouTube, and in the coming hours will also be available on all of your usual podcast providing platforms. Please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and let's get involved in the conversation. Leave a comment if you will. Just before I introduce my guest for this evening, I need to give a shout out to our sponsors over at Forrest Precision Engineering. They are a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company, and they've been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for many years, and we're absolutely delighted that they're backing our podcast. You can get them over at forrestprecisioneng.com, and you can also visit the Forrest Precision Executive Lounge, a stunning new hospitality area within the historic main stand at Ibrox. And for more information on how to book that unique and intimate space, you can email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Joined this evening, folks, by Mr. Brian Archer to discuss an abomination in Austria. Nice for use of alliteration there. Better than anything the team conjured up last night, mate.
Yeah, definitely abomination is the right word for it, to be honest. Another disastrous performance, just one of a long list of them in the last few weeks.
Yep, just rubbish. You try and be positive and, stuff like that, but I don't even know what to think or say anymore. You just feel like when you're doing these shows and you're speaking to your mates at the pub or at work or anything like that, you're just repeating yourself all the time. And you could copy and paste the podcast that we're going to do tonight for the ones that we've done since the start of the season, to be honest.
Yeah, mate, the only positive I could come away with from last night was that it's another game closer to about the end of May, and we can have a break for all this. And I'm saying that, and it's only, what date is it? October the 3rd, and I'm already just ticking them off, waiting to the end of May until all this can be over.
I know. But, I feel sorry for the fans that were there last night. I was thinking about going over myself, and then it's just like, I don't know. I know a couple of guys, Kev Gilmore, Mr. Harry Potter, the celebrity. You should know who he is, guys, over there. In Graz FaceTiming me yesterday for Gatwick Airport, having a GBX party with all the security staff at 5 o'clock in the morning. This is the type of people that are following the club home, away, abroad, paying thousands of pounds, and mate, it's just it's the fans that I feel sorry for, the people that are going over, spending their hard-earned cash, us included, I suppose.
Yeah, mate, it's difficult, and the part that kind of I feel sorry for the most, I guess, is that in the last few years, we've been to much tougher places than Sturm Graz, and we've actually been going into these European games confident of getting wins. It wasn't that long ago that we went to Borussia Dortmund and turned them over, and we're a far, far cry from that today, to be honest. It's just worrying how far it's fallen, to be honest, that it seems like even Europa League standard is beyond us at this point. I know, the Champions League campaign a few years ago was a bitter pill to swallow, but, at least we all kind of knew then that Europa League was probably about our level. I think we're really in danger of falling far below that just now if we keep going the way we're going, to be honest.
No, you're right. And let's be quite honest, next season there is a high possibility that we might not even get the Europa League, and we'd need to go through 2 or 3 qualifiers at least for the Conference League because of how the coefficient's been set up now. So, it's concerning.
To be honest, mate, if the way things are going, if we keep going the road they're going, we'll be lucky to make top 6 at this rate. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, and people are like, "Oh, there's only 6 games gone." You can't be saying stuff like that, but it's genuinely how I feel. If you look at the start to the league campaign, right, Celtic aside, it's not really been that difficult a start on paper. In terms of, we've not been to Tynecastle, we've not been to Easter Road yet, we've not been to Pittodrie. So when the fixtures were released, I kind of looked at the first 5 or 6 games and thought, you know what, we've got a pretty easy, a pretty favourable draw there in terms of a new manager coming in trying to implement his style. It's not the worst start to a season. And we've completely blown it with 6 games in, if you're being honest about it. And I know people will say, well, at least, Celtic are stumbling, so that gives us a chance. But I'm not even looking at Celtic's results anymore. Like last weekend, I didn't even know they'd drop points because it's kind of redundant at the minute if we're not doing our job and we're not confident of getting into these games and winning. I know, okay, we won last weekend, but it wasn't exactly winning because of some master plan. It was essentially a fluke because at the end they kind of threw the kitchen sink at it and we got a lucky break, and that'll happen, now and again, but it's not a strategy going forward.
No, you're right. And again, on paper, we're a Europa League group. When that draw was made, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking we should get the top 8. Now, I know people, you've got tough games against, Roma and Porto and stuff like that on paper, but at the same time, we finished in the top 8 last season. Nope, I've got a visitor. We finished in the top 8 last season. Sorry, I'll need to go for a wee second. Bear with me, Brian. Can you hold up? I'm just going to see who that is. Sorry, mate. I'll be a couple of minutes.
No worries. I'll just kind of chat to myself. But yeah, just kind of what Craig was saying there. When we all looked at this group, we kind of thought, do you know what? That's not the worst draw to be drawn out in the Europa League. We're beating better teams than what we're facing this season, and we're, far, far below the standard of previous seasons. I think most people would have looked at the Roma draw and thought, you know what, that's as close to a glamour tie as we've got. Probably looking forward to it, a chance to compete against a real top European name. But now you're kind of going into that match and you're kind of fearing the worst because there's a real possibility that they could just turn us over and it could be another Bruges. To be honest, and I'm kind of looking at it now. Two games going in Europe, and we're going to be lucky to get into the next stage. To be honest, I'm kind of you're thinking that the league phase might be the end of it for us for this season, but yeah, not much to really be positive about, unfortunately. The only positive out of the game last night for me was Gassama. Seems to be the only player that's at least delivering something, and the tactic appears to be that just give the ball to Gassama and hope that he can do something. And he is still contributing. He's hit the woodwork on a few occasions in previous games. He's been unlucky. He's scored a few goals, to be fair to him. So he's kind of the only one that's really contributing, to be honest. But yeah, aside from that, there's not really much to be positive about in terms of the new players. Just so many of them just look like they're like fish out of water, really. They just look like coming up here is just, a completely different world for them from anything that they're used to, whether it's the pressure or what it is. But we've seen that before with players coming up, particularly from the English leagues, whether they kind of underestimate the standard of Scottish football or they get spooked by the physicality or the expectation. It's just a real concern, and it's a concern that we all had when we signed them.
Sorry about that. I've just had
no worries.
a niece yesterday and I'm out of breath because I'm a top floor flat and everybody's coming down and getting their wishes and all that. Who were you talking about, Brian? Could have been anyone, to be honest.
Yeah, just about the general kind of lack of positivity in terms of, just for me, I feel like we're heading in a really bad direction. It's looking like qualifying in the next stage is going to be beyond us. If I'm being, I know it's only 2 games gone, but if you look at Roma and Porto to come, I don't see how we get beyond the league phase, to be honest.
I mean, it is a concern. I think what I was saying before I went off there, that we should be qualifying for the top 8 on paper. And I mean, I know people say European games are tough, blah blah blah. That's fine, but I mean, the last few years in Europe, even last season, we've been really good and really consistent. Got to the quarterfinals last year. we're the third highest ranked team in this competition. So we're not here by a fluke or anything like that, but you wouldn't think it looking at these last two performances, and on paper, I think Brand's the next game away into it. On paper, again, like the league, you couldn't have handpicked easier fixtures. Do you know what I mean? And I'm looking at these first three games saying we should be able to win all three, to be honest. And I think even last season we would have won all three. But at the very least, I'm thinking at least 7 points. You know what I mean? Won the game at Ibrox and then, 4 points out of six away from home. And you're well on your way to getting into the top eight. But, I mean, you're right. Like, Porto game, Roma, you need to pick up, I think, at least 10 points just to get into the sort of next one. And if we don't beat Bran in the next game, then I think we could be saying goodbye to Europe altogether.
Yeah, that's my worry. And to be honest, the thing for me is if you look at any team since Gerrard's came in, and that was the one thing that Gerrard did when he first came in, is he built respectability in Europe. Those first two seasons under him domestically weren't great. And I think sometimes that gets somewhat sugar-coated because of the 55 season. But what he did do was he built respectability in Europe. And then that was kind of, added to by Gio and taking us to Seville and everything. But, well, stripping that away week by week, to be honest, we're really kind of damaging that reputation. And yeah, I can't see much to be positive about in terms of Europe if we keep going with this management team, to be honest. And I think it's just going to be, more of the same, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, look, he'll look at moments and stuff like that, and he keeps talking about sort of mentality's issue, this, that, and the next thing. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen it today, Brian. Every single one of these previous clubs, he's coming out with the same comments: mentality, 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 mentality. At what point does that guy look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm the problem here?
Yeah. I think I seen somebody say today that's 4 different clubs, probably about 100 odd different players that he's worked with, and mentality's been the issue in all of the clubs. Like that cannot be the case. At some point, you have to look in the mirror and go, maybe it's me, but I don't really think he's got the personality to do that. When you watch his interview last night on TNT Sport, I just thought it was terrible the way he presented himself, the way he's kind of smirking on camera and trying to be kind of short with the interviewer. I just thought it was all a terrible look. He comes across as very arrogant, and for a man that's won, not an awful lot in his managerial career, he's not really got the credibility to carry that kind of arrogance. This isn't a Jose Mourinho that can say, shows your medals and here you go, this is what I've done. He's, what he took Southampton to what, a playoff win. He didn't even get automatic promotion. It was a playoff win in the championship. And I don't see it with him at all. And I think we were kind of all worried when he was appointed that this was going to happen. And to be fair, I think we were all, once it was appointed and we all kind of got over that initial, right, okay, maybe wouldn't be our first choice, but I think we were all willing to give him a chance. And, when pre-season started, you seen the training clubs come out and the stuff at St George's Park, and there was positive noises coming out about the training regime and, the fitness work that was getting done and all this and all these kind of sound bites that come out. And I think people were genuinely, excited about the potential for this attacking, swashbuckling football that we were all promised, but we've just seen absolutely none of it.
Well, apparently the players are the best trainers in the world, because all the amazing stuff that these players are doing, it only actually seems to happen behind closed doors and when there's no cameras on them. I think even that happened in pre-season, to be honest. Like, obviously the games we played at Ibrox, there was some decent spells, maybe in the second half when he made changes after being, I think, 2-0 down in both friendlies. But I think we won a game like 6 or 7-0, and that was behind closed doors. So, maybe we should just get coronavirus back and get the stadium shut again, because that seems to be the only way that these players thrive, is like behind closed doors. But it's just, you know, when we came back up, everyone was excited, but I think very early we realised that, this was going to take time. Even the second season with Pedro, people look back and say, aye, Pedro, he did get some money to spend, certainly compared to the likes of Warburton. But I mean, that's nothing compared to, what we've spent this summer, what we've spent in the past under Gio when Ross Wilson was there. The money that we have basically just pissed up against the wall for the last 4 or 5 seasons, it's absolutely ridiculous. And to be quite frank, it's unacceptable. And this new regime was supposed to change that. We were all told, oh, these are the proper people. We've got serious people in now. I can't lie, Brian. Like, see, I mean, I'm only 28, so people will remember, back to the 80s and stuff like that, when things were really bad, and I think we're finishing like 4th and 5th at some points. But at least the club had an identity back then. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems to be now, like, year by year, our sort of culture and identity, it's slowly but surely being stripped back by those in charge. And it just doesn't seem like the same team that I grew up supporting, because everything's changed, and we know what happened in 2012 was a massive watershed moment for us and Scottish football, but we can't keep using that as an excuse now. Do you know what I mean? The first couple of years coming back up, fair enough, right? We expected it would take time, but this now, in terms of when things are supposed to be normal, and we're back in the league and Celtic are there as well, and we're out spending money, and things are on paper back to kind of what they should be in terms of us being back up consistently. This is possibly the worst I've ever felt as a Rangers fan, and like just complete numbness, because you're starting to not even feel things anymore, because, as I say, it's just numbing, mate. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're seeing the same things time and time again, and you're just desperate for it to change, but you can't see it happening anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's complete apathy. That's kind of where we're heading, is that people are just getting apathetic towards it. We're going into games kind of knowing what's going to happen. We'll play poorly, we'll give up loads of chances, we'll probably concede at least one. We might have the odd 20 minutes of pressure. Maybe if we're lucky, like we were on the weekend, we might sneak something, but overall it's going to be a tough watch. And it's just not, there's nothing, joyful about watching Rangers at the minute. It's like, it's a complete slog. It's just not great. And you're talking about identity and culture, and going back to 2012 and saying how that was a watershed moment. But for me, we kind of climbed the mountain when we won 55, and that was the moment to go, right, we're back, let's build on it. And it's just been one bad decision after another. And if you look at the team that Gerrard built when he won 55, and if I go back to what I consider to be like my Rangers team in Walter's second spell, the one thing those two teams had in common were we didn't always have, the most skillful players, but what we did have was a core group of players that knew what it meant to play for this club. They knew the expectations, they knew the demands, they knew what it was like to play with the pressure of a fan base that expects to win every week. We had guys like McGregor, like Scott Arfield, like Ryan Jack, like Stephen Davis, guys that knew what this club was about. We don't have any of that in this current team, and we've got guys like Max Aarons that's coming out and openly admitting that, yeah, the pressure from the fans is really getting to us. Well, I'm sorry, but if it's getting to you, then, enjoy your cushy, life at Bournemouth. But Rangers isn't the club for you. The demands at Rangers have always been the same. That'll never change. And you can argue about, are we too harsh as a fan base? Do we expect too much? To me, that's kind of irrelevant, because that's always been there, and it will always be there. And I would argue is that it should always be there, because see, the day that we don't expect to win the league, or we don't expect to beat Motherwell away, or Dundee, or St Mirren, or Celtic, that's the day we might as well pack up and give in.
No, you're spot on, and I've kind of wrestled with that sort of argument myself, Brian. Like in the last sort of few months, and I think, well, are we too harsh as a fan base and stuff like that? And let's be honest, there are quite a few nutters in in the Rangers support. We all know that, but no, you're right. We don't change. We're not supposed to change. For me, if Rangers is Rangers because of the supporters and because of what we make the club and the standards and the expectations that we have. The minute that we lose those expectations, we stop being Rangers, in my opinion, and we stop being that special club. And all that stuff about, oh, it's going to take time, blah, blah, blah. Right, we know that, right? But, with the money that we have spent, it's just unacceptable to be having these results against the level of opposition that you're having it against. If it's the case that, for me, the whole it takes time thing, right? That would mean that at an absolute minimum, you're going to win 90 odd percent of your league games, and maybe you fall up short against Celtic in they 4 games because they're just a wee bit better than you or whatever, and then over time you can bridge that gap. I think most Rangers fans, as much as we wouldn't accept it, I think we could get on with it and understand if that was the case. But we can't even beat Motherwell. We can't even beat Dundee. Struggling, in the second half against Livingston. And it's just, I've said it for the last couple of years, the amount of managers that we have had, they just overthink Scottish football is just ridiculous. I mean, in my opinion, you do not need to be a tactical genius or a footballing expert to work out how to play in the Scottish League. It's been the same since day dot. Do you know what I mean? Celtic found a manager a few years ago that basically hacked the league and realised that this is how you play and this is how you win the games, and we'll do that. These other philosophy managers, I don't get them. I don't understand them. I've never understood them. I think now there is a massive body of evidence over the last maybe 15 years to say that unless, you are Pep Guardiola in Barcelona or Man City, it's not going to work. How many managers do you get that are coming, even like in some of the lower leagues in Scotland? I mean, a guy in my work, he goes to a lot of junior games and he's saying that you're getting some managers thinking that they're Pep Guardiola in the juniors, and you're just like, come on, man. It's like the egos of these guys, and it's like the whole sort of culture thing, like Football Manager, FIFA, and stuff like that. Stats. It's all played its toll and influencing a lot of these sort of younger hipster managers who, quite frankly, they've not got a clue, in my opinion. And by the way, to be fair, some things it can work. Like, look at Hearts and Brighton, right? So they'll talk about stats and analysis and stuff like that, and how Tony Bloom is, the best in the business for that. That can work. See it like undervalued teams like Brighton or Union Saint-Gilloise or Hearts, where there's no real like pressure on them. You will have the time to make mistakes, and the rewards can be big. You're not going to get that at Rangers. And I actually think for Hearts, I think that is a sort of perfect bloom. Well, it is, for someone like him, because they're exactly the type of club that he should be going for. And I mean, see, to be honest, I mean, if Hearts were to finish third every year for the next 10 years, I'm pretty sure their fans would, I mean, they would love that. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's perfect for them. But to be fair, they're going in a decent run now. And, well, I mean, some other team other than users of Celtic have got to win the league at one point. The law of averages dictates that nothing can last forever. So, to be honest, I think they've got a pretty decent chance this season.
Yeah, I do as well. And to be fair to Hearts, Tony Bloom's came on board and it's all about data and analysis and all that. But they've also hired a manager that knows the league and knows how to get results at teams like Hearts. And I'm not sitting here suggesting that Derek McInnes is the answer for Rangers. I actively didn't want him at Rangers over the last few years when his name's been mentioned. I'll be quite honest about that. But, they knew what was required in terms of a manager, and they went out and got him. Now, I think something different is required at Rangers. It's not Derek McInnes, but We don't seem to be. It's just one bad decision after another. In terms of appointing Russell Martin, I mean, all they had to do when they were interviewing Russell Martin or considering Russell Martin for the Rangers job was go and watch clips of his last three clubs in Swansea, MK Dons, and Southampton. And that would have told you exactly what kind of Rangers team that hiring him was going to give you. And it was exactly what we've seen. It was conceding goals through individual errors like last night. The two goals that we conceded last night, I'm pretty sure if you watch tapes of his Southampton team, you'll see them concede very similar goals where it's individual errors and it's being completely wide open at the back and in the midfield, because that's how he coaches. That's what you get with a Russell Martin team. I think there's enough of there's a body of evidence there to tell you that. Now, we all knew it when they came in. We had fans of his previous clubs on podcasts all throughout the summer telling us this guy doesn't know how to organise a defence, telling us that, you want to tear your eyes out essentially watching this at times. They all knew it. So why did the people that are paid the big bucks to hire the Rangers manager, why did they not know it?
That's a good point, and I think we'll come on to the executives properly in a moment, but I think that this is the age of not just life in general, not just football, where you get people in high positions of power and authority, and you're thinking, how in God's green earth did you end up in that position? And it seems to be the same type of person. I look at a guy like Patrick Stewart, I don't see anything there. I see an executive, a classic business executive who's managed to brown nose his way to the top of Man U because he's hung around long enough, do you know what I mean? And he's been in with the right people. And every workplace has got people like that. Well, you get people that get moved up into higher positions because they keep themselves close to the source of power. And to me, they're just life suckers, do you know what I mean? People like that who they don't offer anything of value at all. They just drain the life out of people around them. And again, look at the people that he's hiring. I mean, Kevin Felwell. And do you know what? I was actually letting him off, well, up until a couple of days ago when it was announced that we were going to give his boy a gig. But, for me, Russell Martin was a clear problem. He should never have been appointed. All right, that's fine. Patrick Stewart has been a massive problem now for pretty much a year on multiple issues. But with Kevin Felwell, I was sort of giving him the benefit of the doubt because he has only just came in. He did only just come in the summer, but slowly but surely, you are just seeing that this guy, again, is not capable of performing in the role that we have given him. Again, it's like the arrogance, kind of like Russell Martin, the arrogance of him to appoint his son. And now you're seeing this guy that we're going to appoint on the board for Manchester, some copper for Manchester. And I said earlier, I mean, it's quite ironic. That guy was probably trying to battle Rangers fans at the UEFA Cup final in 2008. And now, 17 years later, he's going to be, the Chief Operating Officer or something like that. It's jobs for the boys. It's the same people that are getting it all the time. And you know what? Sometimes that can work. Like if you're running a successful company, successful business, a successful football club, that can work. And I mean, to be fair, like it's happened at Rangers in the past as well, where people have got their favourites, and even Motor had his favourite players, guys like McCulloch and Kirk Broadfoot and stuff like that. Remember the time where he would just randomly play Charlie Adam in a big match, but he was allowed to do that because he was a successful manager and those changes worked. These people are making these changes and they've got absolutely nothing to back it up with.
No, they've got no credibility to be making the decisions that they're making at the minute. That kind of jobs for the boys, as you call it, and it can work. Yeah, it can work when the guys that are bringing them in have got the credibility to say, look, here's my medals, this is what I've done, this is what I've contributed to this success. So they'll get backed in those kind of decisions. Kevin Thelwell's not built up any credibility. If anything, he's got less credibility now than when he started, because we're all looking at these summer signings and going, how many of these have turned up so far? And right now it's one in Gassama, I would argue, and that's about it. And he spent £8 million on a boy for Everton that he would have known from before, who I don't want to be too harsh on him because he's not had the chances that a Rangers number 9 should be getting in these types of games. But I've seen nothing to suggest that he's worth £8 million to Rangers. He might be an £8 million player to a Bournemouth or a Brighton or an Everton, but it's different being an £8 million player to those clubs where that's just kind of sofa change. Whereas up here, you need to come in and you need to be guaranteeing 20 goals a season in this league. And right now, if you asked me if he would get anywhere close to that, I would say no, to be honest. And I think the one thing, to go back to kind of Patrick Stewart and the whole conversation around the executives, I think the one thing we're massively lacking the executive level is a bit of charisma and a bit of personality. I mean, you look at Patrick Stewart and how can, the CEO is kind of supposed to be the one that's the top of the club, kind of setting the standards from top down. And he doesn't look to have the charisma or the personality. And I know he's not out there at press conferences every week the way the manager is, but he's still supposed to be the kind of main decision maker, the kind of main standard setter for most of the club. For all of his faults, if you look at somebody like Dave King, now Dave King had a bit about him. He had a bit of personality. He had a bit of charisma. He wasn't afraid of a battle. He knew when to kind of put his shoulder to the wheel and kind of back us. Whereas Patrick Stewart just seems to fold like a cheap suit at every opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right. He does. And even like, I know what you mean charisma, and that is a fair point, but we're not even looking for a bit of charisma, we're looking for a leader. Do you know what I mean? Someone to lead the club forward. And like, I know now Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Maraf are now getting it tight off the fans, and at the end of the day, that's fair enough because they're the owners, and ultimately the buck will stop with them. But at the same time, you need to remember, who is it that's going to be feeding these guys information? It's Patrick Stewart. Kavanagh will probably be in America, and he'll have his weekly chats on the phone. They're on Zoom with Patrick Stewart, and he'll just be, "Aye, everything's fine." Whilst the Burling house is, it's skewed away in the background. Like he's got the camera on the part of the house that isn't burning. So Andrew Kavanagh thinks everything's okay. At some point though, he's going to have to realise that people are going to have to go. And at the end of the day, you would imagine that the time has passed. To be quite frank, I was going to say the time should be coming soon. I mean, it's been and gone as far as I'm concerned for people to be losing their jobs. It's well overdue. But this guy's made his money in American health insurance. To get to the top of that industry in that country, you need to have something about you. You need to have that firmness, that leadership, the ability to make strong, tough decisions. So I'm hopeful that if he does see things, and he would have seen it at the Genk game and whatnot, and obviously the protest at the Hibs game the week before, he would have seen that, and you would hope that he will act on it eventually. But again, it's like, to what everybody seems to think, nothing's going to be changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Andrew Kavanagh's clearly not a silly man, and as much as he might be being told by Stuart and Thelwell, "Yep, don't worry, everything's fine, we've got it under control, this pain was to be expected," etc., etc. He'll know. He has to know. He can't not know. He just has to watch any of our home games or even the away games and see the banners and hear the chanting and see the protests. And at some point, I dare say there's going to, if Martin's still in charge, at some point, I dare say boycotts will be getting mentioned. I've already seen mention of it on social media. So as much as Stuart might tell him that everything's fine, he's going to know that it's not. And the one thing I hope is that these new owners have got that ruthless streak in them where they go, right, okay, time for a change. But my fear is that changing it now almost admits that they got it wrong. And I wonder if there's a bit of them that that's why they're not changing it, because what does that then say about them? What does that then say about the people that appointed Russell Martin if they have to fire him so soon?
Well, for me, that's something that Patrick Stewart and Kevin Felwell, I think the reason that they are not pulling the trigger on Russell Martin is because if he goes, then they will have to go as well, in the eyes of the owner. I think that's happened. Patrick Stewart, I mean, the guy publicly backed Phil Clement and then sacked him a week later. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's that all about? And if he does that again twice in the space of a year, the owners are going to look at that and be like, I mean, what are you doing? So, to make those two monumental errors in the space of 12 months, coupled in with all the other things that he's done, that's why he's not letting them go. Kevin Felwell has spent over 20 million quid. He's clearly been given a free rein to do what he wants because he's bringing his boy in. He's bringing guys in for Everton that he knows and he scouts and stuff like that. And all his other people for Everton as well. So, again, it's jobs for the boys. And if they get rid of Russell Martin, they'll realise that they're not going to fall that far behind as well. So, for me, that's why Felwell and Stewart are getting rid of him.
Yeah, I think there's truth in that, to be honest. I think, clearly it's a bad look for them, that given them being the ones that appointed him. And if they were to get rid of him, would you really trust them to get the next appointment right?
Nah, no chance. Absolutely no chance. And I mean, look, we've all seen the clip, and I did want to touch on it earlier of Farewell and Stewart being confronted in the hotel in Austria. And to be fair to the fan, like, I think he was quite level-headed. Do you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't screaming abuse or anything like that in their face. He was trying to be, I think, as open and upfront as he could have been, considering what could have happened to them. Let's be brutally honest. I think he was fairly level-headed, but Farewell to me actually seemed to take it okay. Like, he was at least trying to have a conversation with the guy and whatnot. Patrick Stewart, again, he's so slimy. Do you know what I mean? Just running away, folding like a cheap suit, like you say, Brian, at every opportunity. And the audacity of him to turn around and say, who would you bring in as a manager? Well, I'm sorry, mate. Name literally about 30 people off the top of your head. Like, literally anyone is better than this right now. Like, and that's not an exaggeration. Do you know what I mean? McInnes, Dyche, Lampard, Muscat, Gerrard, Derek McInnes, there's 6 off the top of my head. You take all of them, over Russell Martin right now. So for him to come down and say something like that, again, it's just the absolute arrogance ripping out of these people at the club who, again, let's be quite honest, they've achieved nothing. They've managed to keep themselves close to the source of power for their whole lives, and now they've risen up to be, top level executives. They bring absolutely nothing to the table. They've got nothing about them, and as far as I'm concerned, they need to go as well.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. And to be honest, I find it quite galling that the Rangers CEO actually turned around to a fan and said, "Well, who would you appoint?" And that's like, imagine any other chairman or chief exec of Rangers in years gone past, saying that to a fan. It's just ridiculous. It's just, that's not our jobs, and it's like, yeah, it's just another example of another person in position of power at Rangers being completely unqualified for that role. He's not got the character, as I say, he's not got the charisma to be Rangers CEO. He's clearly not able to stand up to the pressure. You could see that in that clip that he just wanted to be anywhere else other than in that situation, and he just didn't handle it at all. And as you say, I'll give Thelwell some credit. He at least handled it, a lot better than what Patrick Stewart did. And yeah, it was just another example of him being completely unfit for the position that he's in.
No, you're spot on. And I mean, like, we all know that Russell Martin's a problem. But there is actually a wee part of me that's starting to feel a wee bit sorry for him because, to be fair to him, he has always been the same throughout his managerial career. Like, he's no changed. He was quite open. He has actually been quite open and upfront and honest with the board and the fans in terms of, this is the way I'm going to play it and I'm not going to change. So I can at least kind of respect him for that, even as much as it's been rubbish to watch and whatnot. But the guys in charge need to realise that these are the people that have put this guy in charge. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with the people making those decisions. I mean, I've worked in a workplace in the past where employees just left constantly and constantly and constantly, and the guy who was the operations manager, it was everybody else's fault but his. Everyone else's fault. Oh, that person I hired, they weren't good at this, they weren't good at that, blah, 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 blah. Why did you hire them then? You can't, they want the best of both worlds. They want to hire somebody and give them all the praise at the start and say, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And then, when things don't work out, or they were rubbish anyway, it's never my fault. And that's not proper leadership. If you're a leader, a proper leader, you admit when you got things wrong. And everybody makes mistakes. Hold your hand up, Patrick Stewart, hold your hand up, Kevin Felwell. Admit you made a mistake. Admit you make a mistake, and the fans might actually start to respect you. I mean, I think they're probably too far gone now, Stewart and Felwell. They're certainly Stewart in terms of winning the fans' background, but the only way now for them to even start to turn the tide with the supporters is for them not only to sack Russell Martin, but for them to come out and just admit you got it wrong and you made a mistake. That's all the fans are asking for.
Yeah, actually, I think it's still savable for Felwell, to be honest. I've got serious doubts about his position and his suitability for that role. For me, mostly because if you look at all his signings, he's went to the English market for the most part, and it looks like he's brought up a crop of players that possibly are very ill-suited to Scottish football. And we've seen this movie before when we've shopped in the English market. And we've seen how players can come up here and vastly underestimate the league in some aspects. And you almost think that they've come up and they always kind of thought, this will be a bit of a scoosh. I've been at Everton, Premier League, glitz and the glamour. I'll come up to Scottish football and this will be a scoosh. I'll just bring some players up from England and yeah, they'll cakewalk it up here. But that's never worked. Never worked. All he had to do was look at previous examples and that would have told them that that just doesn't work. So for me, there's massive question marks about Thelwell, and I think he's very close to kind of being unrecoverable, I would say, for the fans. But for me, Stewart should have went when the new ownership came in. I was actually surprised they kept him on. I kind of assumed he was only here to facilitate the takeover, and then they would have came in and appointed their own CEO. And it would have went from there. To be honest, I was surprised that he stayed on when the new ownership arrived, and I think that was the moment to have a clean break, because there was already fairly bad feeling between the fans and Patrick Stewart after the whole Tifo incident, and then the fact that he came out and backed Philip Clement and then sacked him a week later. So he'd already kind of started to burn some credibility there. So I thought, the time for a clean break was when the 49ers came in and Andrew Cabinet then came in, and I thought the moment was to just, clean the house and get their own man in. And for whatever reason, they've not done that, but I do think it's the writing's on the wall now for Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, just one of a number of people that need to go, I'm afraid. But yeah, it's never dull following Rangers anyway, Brian, that's for sure. Guys, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Bit of a therapy session for us all, but it's good to talk about these things when things are so bad, and we can let off a bit of steam. And I think we had an agenda set up and we've not even followed it at all. But then that's kind of what happens when you do these ones where everything's so messed up and whatnot. But thanks everyone for joining us at home tonight. It'll be Rob, Alan and Ross on Sunday. As I say, we're live on YouTube at the moment. We'll be on all of our usual podcast providers in the coming hours as well. Brian, mate, thanks very much for coming on and joining me.
No worries, thank you.
Not a problem at all, mate. And thanks to the viewers at home. I'll see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.